I came across a couple articles that I really wanted to talk about, and it basically just is kind of going over this, for lack of a better term, this cancer that has really taken over a lot of like AAA studios and how it really stifles creativity to the point to where developers aren't able to do the things that they would like to do. They now hold more power over the development of a game than the actual developers. And I think that's becoming very obvious with a lot of these recent games that have come out. Now, to be fair, I think that indie developers don't really see this as much because a lot of the indie publishers or the publishers they choose to work with aren't these big conglomerate companies, and so they don't really stifle that creativity as much. So let's just get into it. There was an article from Rock Paper Shotgun that did an interview with the creator of Vampire Survivors and how he kind of talked about their journey from developer to publisher. And in the article, he says, I see a lot of publishers I don't like, and I think that's my way to define what a good publisher should be, probably. I see a lot of publishers that try to exploit platforms just to make money, basically, because the video game industry is very obviously an industry that makes a lot of money. There is a lot of money to make. I see that these publishers will try and just exploit platforms for money. And that's the basic premise of a company, is to make money, yes. And he's not wrong here. They do. A lot of these publishers only see games as a way to make money, not as a way to push this creativity or, this amazing idea for a game. And instead, they look at if they can make money off of it first before they even do anything further. And I think that's where he's kind of going with this. What a publisher should do is, first of all, make genuine games, genuine products, something that has some real value, and then understand that not everything can be a breakout hit. He is exactly on the money with this, because a lot of publishers will only greenlight a game if they think that there is some way to monetize it or to make a large sum of money. A lot of games get turned down by the bigger publishers mainly because they don't see any real, dollar bills, in it. They don't see the sack of money being thrown at them. And I think there's a good possibility that a lot of games have not come into the limelight because of that. And it's a huge issue. It's these kind of affordable games with smaller teams that Galanti wants to lean towards in publishing. And in particular, his priority is to find devs that are very transparent with what they do. They want to talk with their community, and they have a real, genuine passion for making games. It's important to me that these devs get to realize their vision by enriching it, as opposed to forcing in things like microtransactions or season passes. And again, I'll reiterate, that's what a lot of these publishers want. They want to see a game and they're like, okay, well, this could be big because it follows certain trends or whatever. Because if it doesn't follow a trend, they're not going to greenlight it to begin with. So what do they care? But if they can greenlight it, then they want to basically tell these devs that, okay, well, you need to add this form of monetization or this kind of season pass, or we're not going to do anything with it. We won't give you any money. We won't do this with it. We won't even touch it. It really puts a hindrance on what a lot of these developers can and cannot do. Galanti is, perhaps most importantly, fully aware with how lucky he got with Vampire Survivors, and that's why he wants to publish other games. We definitely made some mistakes when it comes to putting the game out there, but we learned a lot and want to try and sort of share what we learned with other indies. It was a way to try and give something back to the indie community. Share the luck. And I think that's something that a lot of developers that kind of like find their breakout hit, or they have like this massive success with something that they never expected to be a success. And, they learn a lot as they go, and yes, they make mistakes, or they could have done something differently, and they kind of learn from that. And now they just want to kind of, share that wealth of knowledge with somebody else or with other developers and, kind of guide them along a better path. It's not really uncommon. You see a lot of indie studios that do this. A lot of your bigger name companies, they are not going to take that risk. They are in a zero risk mindset. And if they are not 100% sure that it's going to be something good or something, profitable, they won't take that risk. Like, no shot. Again, there's this constant talk about how publishers are very, very quickly becoming the cancer of the gaming industry. Now, while there are some cases of development teams being, cancerous because of, culture, or they're political views being expressed through games or through other means. We all use the meme, just put the fries in the bag. Nobody really cares what your worldview is if all they want is just to play a game and escape reality for a little bit, or, just have fun with some friends, whatever. Nobody cares. I think a lot of people can agree with that kind of mentality, that they don't care what these developers think as far as political views, social, whatever, or their worldview is on things. They don't care. They just want to play a game. That's it. Now, another person that has come to light and shared their experiences with publishers and how they literally don't let you have that creativity and that freedom when it comes to making games is somebody that is very well known for being very creative and being very unique. And that is a composer for Final Fantasy, Nobuo Uematsu. And he also did an interview with a Japanese outlet, but it was translated for the sake of this article, so I'm going to go off of that. So sorry if it's botched or whatever in translation. I won't go as far as to call it stagnation, but I believe directors and producers hold too much power in their hands, even when it comes to the music. Again, we're seeing the same mentality and the same thing coming from people within game development, and even somebody as well known as him is saying the exact same thing. Even now, game composers aren't in a position to speak their opinion freely, and no matter how much musical knowledge or technical skills they possess, they're still in a position where it's difficult to speak their mind. I reiterate, and I know I'm probably going to sound like a broken record at this point, but publishers hold way too much power when it comes to the decision making and the actual development of a game. There are almost no game producers who are well versed in worldwide entertainment and are familiar with a wide variety of musical genres, so anything goes for them as long as you make it sound like a John Williams movie soundtrack. And he's not wrong. These publishers want to chase trends. So the main argument with chasing these trends is that you're not really doing anything to push the industry forward. All you're doing is just basically making a carbon copy of what's came before and what's already succeeded. So there's no real creativity there. And at that point, chasing that trend is just copycatting what somebody else has already done. And I think that's the point he's trying to make, is that too often these publishers want to make it sound like something else or look like something else or play like something else because that's what made a lot of money, or it was popular or whatever. So it kind of goes in line with everything we've seen over the last few years. Best example I can give is Fortnite. It really blew open the BR genre. Every developer, every publisher wanted to pump out a BR. And the problem with that is that they are all the exact same thing. Why would you want to do something that is basically just, following suit with what Fortnite did, when Fortnite clearly does it better, but every other trend chaser isn't doing anything different? They're just copycatting. And when all you can do is copycat, it's bland and boring and no real creativity is involved. The industry has gone from giving game composers little attention to stifling composers' creativity or punishing them toward a narrow type of sound. As a result of that, there's less weird things now. And I get what he's trying to say. And I know it sounds a little bit like odd the way he's saying it, but I understand what he's trying to say. Is like, because all these publishers and whatnot, they want to push a very specific sound, or they push certain genres or whatever. I know, for example, PlayStation likes to push live service, and so a lot of their developers or first party developers have been forced to push these more live service games, and that's not what they want to do. So they're not able to do things that they really want to do. When he's saying there's less weird things, obviously it's saying that there's no room for that growth. There's no room for developers to have creativity or that imagination and throw in something different and weird. I think the best example I can give of weird things from his point of view is when early PS1 with Final Fantasy VII, where he started using these more synthesized kind of sounds, especially with FF7. And then he started throwing in orchestral stuff or choir type music. It kind of pushed things in a way to where people thought of video game music differently. And it sounded more like this, large orchestra or, whatever, more classical music kind of sound. Then we started to see more video game related music or soundtracks start to deter from just synthesized music and this more like 8 or 16-bit type sounds or whatever to higher production value kind of music. If you make the same stuff as John Williams and grow complacent with that, you'll get nothing more from it. I have to agree with him here. He is 100% right. If all you're doing is riding your bike down the same exact road, you're never going to find anything new. You're never going to experience anything new. You're never going to, break out of that bubble, and you're never going to gain anything new from it. You'll be locked in place on that same exact road. You will never really find out what more is out there until these publishers stop holding such a tight grasp over developers. We're never really going to see that creativity outside of indie games anyways. As far as AAA games go, it's fairly obvious that these publishers hold like a very tight grasp over what developers can and cannot do. I don't blame developers for this. I blame obviously the publishers, because they have basically stagnated a lot of game developers. And I think that it's not just in the development side. I think it is also in the cultural side, because there is a lot of echo chamber that goes with it and a lot of like politicizing when it comes to the culture around a development studio. And I think it's fairly obvious because we saw the huge wave of DEI because, as far as, being politically correct, a lot of these companies financially incentivized to go along with this. And even now, we still see it. Maybe it's kind of coming to a halt very slowly, but it is starting to happen where it's not as commonplace, where some of these developers are able to kind of branch out a little bit, but it's definitely still has a stranglehold over like AAA and bigger studios. So, but I still think that a lot of your creativity is ultimately going to come from indie and AA studios. Like there's no way around that. They're the only ones that are really taking these risks and doing what they actually want to do. It's really not even a matter of debate. We all see it. Obviously, I can give the speech of, publishers only want one thing, and that's money, so speak with your wallet. But that doesn't always work, because you're always going to have fanboys, and you'll have people that put out reviews and are paid by these people to say certain things, and so it kind of pushes the narrative in a different direction or pushes people's opinion in a certain way. To be fair, a lot of these bigger companies and these bigger games, like your Call of Duties, your World of Warcrafts, all that kind of stuff, Halo, all these companies, like these games have been around, and they've basically formed this massive following of people. That following of people very easily is blinded by their nostalgia. The games that came before and the ones they grew up playing were so good, and they'll always buy these games because in the hopes that, oh, well, the next one will be a little bit better. Well, the next one will be better. Okay, that one wasn't so good. Maybe next time. They're never going to give it up. Never. And you're never going to escape that. So there's no sense in even trying to fight back against that. But what you can do, however, is you can voice your opinion, you can complain about it, and then eventually, maybe one day, these companies will see like lower and lower and lower sales, or lower and lower and lower profit. And eventually it will sink in that, hey, what we're doing isn't doing anything to make us money. Something has to change. And I think the biggest example of that is the major decline of like live service game successes. Obviously, we've seen a lot of live service games come out in recent years that are just fucking awful. Like, they're just terrible, and nobody wants it. Nobody asked for it. And it's reached that point to where a lot of these publishers are starting to realize that, okay, maybe this isn't the play. Let's try something different. Now, obviously, when they say try something different, that means let's polish the turd a little bit and see if they notice. I'm not going to hold my breath for a lot of these companies to, get their shit together, because they're probably not, because there's money on the line, and they're not going to change their ways because they think that what they're doing is the way to go. I think this like insurgence, I guess you could call it, of like indie and AA studios, I think them kind of rising to the top and them being the one to get these, Game of the Year awards, or, people talking so highly about them, and then people bombarding AAA studios with, bad reviews, or, massive smack talk on social media, whatever, or the overall backlash. I think a lot more people are more inclined to gear themselves more towards indie and AA, especially when it comes to pricing. because these AAA studios are, raising the prices because it costs so much to make these games. At least I think they're inflated to cost so much. Obviously, other, smaller development teams can make pretty much the same game for a fraction of the price. Now that has various, factors in play, but I think the overall cost of what some of these AAA games are, I think that if you were to make this, if the same exact games were being made by smaller studios or smaller developers, you would probably get a much better product for a fraction of the cost. And most of them wouldn't push as much marketing towards these games. They would let the game be the marketing, because if you're putting out a good product, the game will sell itself, or the product will sell itself, mainly through word of mouth. So, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about, the cancer that has very, very rapidly become publishers. And I think that they are the ones holding most of the industry behind, at least as far as, your bigger studios. We are very quickly coming to a point to where they are becoming less and less relevant, because most people see that the same thing, if not better, can be done with less and cost less. As some other developers have even said, you don't need to make a game that is for everybody. You should never make something that is targeted for everybody, because then you target nobody. I know that sounds really weird, but in my head it sounded good. So I think in the next few years we might start to see actual good games, with the kind of like the rapid decline of all the DEI nonsense mixed with these indie developers that are now coming out of the woodworks, and they're making their own studios, their own development teams, and they're actually doing what they've always wanted to do. I can't wait for more of these indie and smaller development teams to kind of do their own thing. And I say let these AAA publishers reap exactly what they've sown, because that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to keep plummeting, and the only people they're going to get money out of is these investors and venture capitalists or whatever. But that's it. That's all I want to talk about today. You feel free to give me your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. If you like the video, give it a like. If you enjoy the content and you want to help support me, at the moment the best way to do that is through my Ko-Fi page, where you can support me for as little as $1. Any and all donations go a long way, and I really do appreciate them. But that's all I got for today, guys. So have a good one. Peace.